James Franklin shared some good news about Abdul Carter, which will certainly help Penn State's case going up against Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm your host of this live show. This is going to be the pregame show for the Orange Bowl. Happy Orange Bowl Eve to everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. With this live show, I encourage your contributions, your comments, your questions, your score predictions in the chat, as I will share my final thoughts about Penn State Notre Dame, talk about Abdul Carter's injury update that he is going to play, or at least they anticipate that he's going to play. So James Franklin said in a press conference today that he anticipates that Abdul Carter will be available. It is still a game time decision, but just everything continues to trend to point in the right direction. So what comes to mind with Abdul Carter being available, he's not going to be 100%. And I think Penn State defensively can get creative with that. Now, you want Abdul Carter to be 100%. He's the best defender on this team, arguably the best overall player on this Penn State team. And Tyler Warren certainly has a case, right? Tyler Warren offensively, Abdul Carter defensively. It's nice to have both of them. Abdul Carter's case, though, he is just so dynamic as a playmaker that he isn't boxed into one position. And I think it would actually benefit Penn State if you have Abdul Carter in more of a hybrid role, where he's playing as this defensive end, linebacker, basically stand-up, freelance defender, which he has done as that off-ball linebacker his freshman and sophomore campaigns. And by doing that, you can game plan effectively for what Notre Dame likes to do. Notre Dame likes to run the football. That is their MO. They are not a passing team. They don't pass the ball very well. They are 122nd in the country in yards per completion. And Riley Leonard, because you don't have to do that when you have Riley Leonard as that quarterback, as that dual threat quarterback, that complement to Jeremiah Love. And for what it's worth, Jeremiah Love is going to play, but he's not going to be 100% either. So he will certainly have his limitations. He will have a snap count. And that's where I look at that matchup. When I take my final look at this Penn State Notre Dame game, Abdul Carter versus Riley Leonard is going to be a huge matchup when Abdul Carter's on the football field. I don't expect him to play every single snap, but I expect him to be used strategically. And and they started to do that in the game against Boise State. When it was take away Ashton Genty by any means necessary, Abdul Carter was lining up all across the formation, stand up, defensive end, traditional 4-3 defensive end, stand-up edge rusher when they switched to a 5-2, and they just basically had him hover on the right side, on the left side, standing up over the center. And I'm anticipating a heavier dosage of that against Notre Dame when there's an element of newness to it, in a sense that it's not used frequently. Abdul Carter being this freelance defender where he just lines up wherever, comes in pass rushing situations. But when there's no more, we need to be strategic with our personnel, with our game plan. We want to put some stuff on tape. We don't want to put other stuff on tape. That's all out the window here in a semifinal. Texas knows what Penn State's going to do if they make it. Ohio State knows, who I know is the intended favorite, knows what Penn State likes to do, and they played them. So all the chips are here. Abdul Carter being that permanent quarterback spy for Riley Leonard, I think it is an intelligent wrinkle to the defense if Tom Allen decides to do that. I think Penn State defensively needs to sell out for the run for Notre Dame and try to get them out of their comfort zone. Dare Notre Dame, Mike Denbrock, to say that Riley Leonard and a combination of Jaden Greathouse, Bo Collins, Jordan Faison, if they decide to go to the tight ends, Mitchell Evans, Eli Raridan, that those guys are going to have to beat this Penn State defense. And Penn State's defensive backfield can go up against that handful of pass catchers. A.J. Harris against Jordan Faison. I take A.J. Harris. Jalen Kimber against a Bo Collins. I take Jalen Kimber more often than not, even though that one's a little closer. I like AJ Harris significantly more than I do Jordan Faison. Zion Tracy against Jaden Greathouse. Jalen Reed going up against Mitchell Evans, Eli Raritan, the linebackers. Tony Rojas has been really good for the criticism that he has endured this season. He can cover those tight ends. He has the athleticism and maybe not necessarily the size that Mitchell Evans does at 6'5", 260 pounds, but Tony Rojas can cover just about any tight end in college football. He has that kind of pass coverage ability, athleticism, and you saw it against SMU. So Penn State can run a similar type of game plan. You have to fit it strategically to Notre Dame. But the way that they swarmed against Boise State and Ashton Jeanty, do the same thing for Riley Leonard. Notre Dame's bread and butter is, hey, just because I like puns, it's melting a little bit. Jeremiah Love is not 100%. They still have Jadarian Price. They have Aeneas Williams in the backfield, so they have solid running back depth. But Jeremiah Love's a superstar. He's an all-star. He'll be one of the first running backs selected in a future NFL draft. That's the kind of caliber that he is. So he's limited. Now you can focus a little more on Riley Leonard, who is that 2 to the 1-2 punch of Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard in that backfield for Notre Dame. And then let me take it a step further. Something that maybe more Notre Dame fans are talking about it, but when I look at the general analysis of people that are trying to get a read on this game, nobody mentions the fact that Cooper Flanagan, backup tight end for Notre Dame, is out. He's out for the season, and it's unfortunate. I would like to see Penn State at full strength, Notre Dame at full strength, going up against one another for a chance at the national title, but that's not where we are. You are dealt the hand you are dealt. Cooper Flanagan's value is extremely underrated. This is a guy that it does all the dirty work as that second tight end to Mitchell Evans. Sure, you could use him in the passing game, but he's really an extra blocker. And Notre Dame, which likes to run the football, control the time of possession, establish that physicality, one of their most reliable blockers is not going to be playing. RB1 is not 100%. And in a game where you are facing the best team that you have seen all season, Penn State is better than Georgia. Penn State is better than Texas A&M. Penn State's better than Army, Navy. I don't need to say that. But in a semifinal game, when you rely on your ground game as the Fighting Irish, and you're not at your best, and you're going up against a team that's proven that they are a top 10 defense overall, more particularly a top 10 run defense. And they held Ashton Jeanty in check. But Boise State is... we kind of called it here on the show, just the way that Penn State could make Boise State one-dimensional. You shut down Ashton Jeanty, force Boise State's offense into obvious passing situations, you win that game, and you win that game comfortably. We had it as a 17-point victory here on the show, or an 8, I think it was an 18. I think I had 38-20, and they ended up winning 31-14, so it was in that ballpark. The same thing can be said about Notre Dame. If you force Notre Dame to pass, they are not good on third down when it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, obvious passing situations. Riley Leonard is not efficient under pressure. So that's where the Abdul Carter factor is so important. If he can go, he is anticipated to play. And when he's on the football field, his job should not be that traditional starting 4-3 defensive end. It needs to be, you are taking away Riley Leonard. Your assignment is Riley Leonard. And Abdul Carter has done that, not as much this season because he has been that 4-3 pass rusher, that hand in the dirt, hand in the turf at the line of scrimmage. But as a freshman, as a sophomore, I think it's like riding a bike here. Abdul Carter is going to return to his roots and be that stand-up off-ball linebacker. And Penn State's going to run just by proxy the way that the X's and O's are, more of a formal 4-3 than they have in the past because of what the creativity that they can do with Abdul Carter. Again, it's the flexibility, it's the ability that Carter has that allows you to do this. Not a lot of players allow you this kind of opportunity as a defense to adapt and adjust, and I think it's better suited for a Notre Dame offense that is just run first, run heavy, regardless of the situation. They play with the lead more often than not. Typically, they're within one score. If they are trailing, they're going to be committed to running the football no matter what, unless they are down by multiple scores. And if Penn State can do that, that is a significant key. But that's easier said than done because this is a Notre Dame defense that is opportunistic. They are top 5 objectively. I say Penn State's top 10. Notre Dame's defense collectively is better than Penn State's, if you can believe that from Penn State's perspective. No, anybody that's a Notre Dame fan in here will be like, Zach knows what he's talking about. But yes, objectively, Notre Dame is a top 5 defense. One of the best secondaries in the country, dynamic safety duo in Xavier Watts, Aiden Schuler, Tyler Warren. That matchup is going to be interesting. Can Trey Wallace and Amari Evans do anything on the outside to take some pressure off of Drew? That's going to be interesting. I get done saying, hey, Penn State's defensive backs match up well with Notre Dame's wide receivers. The same can be said on the other side. Notre Dame's defensive backs certainly match up well with Penn State's pass catchers. That's going to do it for our opening segment here on this official Orange Bowl pregame show. Talk about it more. Get your input as I see people are joining the conversation over in the comments section. We'll get your thoughts, your questions, your reactions to this game ahead of the Orange Bowl. Penn State versus Notre Dame doesn't get any better than this for the college football playoff semifinal. And today's live show is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Now, that has definitely happened to me. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for. And Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and lowers your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together all in one place. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when you use all of the app's premium features. One of the best features is the subscription tracker. You can use it to cancel services you do not use anymore, and you will save a ton. Plus, there's a goals feature where you can automatically set aside money for your future, and then there's no more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions, reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Again, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the live show here, Penn State versus Notre Dame. We are getting your thoughts and comments into the show. I don't know. As much as I feel like they will stop the run, I still have questions on the wheels on Notre Dame's quarterback's legs. Okay. So Riley Leonard really helped propel Notre Dame to victory in that game against Georgia because he had what in that game? And I should have the statistics pulled up in front of me, but he was only averaging 3.8 yards per attempt in that one. I mean, Georgia really held the passing attack in check, but it didn't matter. Notre Dame could just run the clock. Georgia's biggest enemy was the clock, and Notre Dame did what it needed to do. Riley Leonard had 90 passing yards on 24 attempts, but was the leading rusher. It wasn't Jeremiah Love. It wasn't Jadarian Price. It was Riley Leonard that had 80 yards. Him as a runner is really effective. Whether it's his speed, whether it's his toughness, his physicality, I think he has some of the best vision when it comes to a runner because Riley Leonard doesn't have track star speed. Now, he does have a gear that most people do not anticipate. But Riley Leonard as a runner is certainly dangerous. But Jeremiah Love not being 100% certainly takes away from that because now more respect is going to be given to Riley Leonard. And like I said, I'm almost anticipating that Tom Allen and Penn State have a card up their sleeve where they're just going to use Abdul Carter as the QB spy. You were permanently player locked on Riley Leonard this entire game. And you have the depth to do that as well. You have Amin Vanover. You have Smith-Vilbert. Bax Granville is coming on strong here down the stretch. Penn State, James Franklin had high praise for the freshman defensive end who was supposed to be a high school senior this year. So it's not all on Abdul Carter to have the Superman type of game. If his responsibility is just solely being a quarterback spy and Abdul Carter can drop into coverage too, it's not just about defending Riley Leonard. It's just about wreaking havoc. It's just about being disruptive. Get into passing lanes, blitz, find the gap, try to do these twists and stunts that Notre Dame routinely does. And now you're going to do it back to them in a sense. Some of that's on tape this season, but not all of it. And Abdul Carter has done it even before this edition of the 4-2-5 defense. All truth. Well, I appreciate that. It's a different perspective for everybody, right? I think a lot of Notre Dame fans are keying in on the fact that they don't believe that Penn State can stop Notre Dame's rushing attack. Jeremiah Love playing is certainly a big deal. It's kind of like having Penn State having Abdul Carter available. Jeremiah Love being available is a big deal for them. It just gives you something else. You still have to factor that, hey, he's got some of the best vision, even if he doesn't have necessarily that breakaway speed like he did for that 98-yard touchdown run against Indiana. And let me point out something about that. You take away that 98-yard touchdown run in that game against Indiana, and Notre Dame's vaunted rushing attack is only averaging 3.1 yards per carry. This is a team that was the number 3 rushing team, and it might have been number 2, but they were averaging over 6 yards per carry. That's some elite stuff. But in the postseason, Indiana and Georgia held them in check, despite playing from behind too. That is something to just keep an eye on, that maybe Notre Dame's rushing attack as a whole is not as strong as it was in the regular season. Game script matters, opponent matters. Georgia and Indiana, still for what it's worth, have really good run defenses, respectable, especially Georgia, right? Georgia's always going to have a top 10 defense in terms of talent. But the offense wasn't playing complementary football, and that's why I never thought that Georgia would make it far. Carson Beck, Gunnar Stockton, that team was not playing complementary football for Georgia this season, whereas Penn State does. Penn State plays complementary football. The offense can bail out the defense can bail out the offense. Same can't be said for Notre Dame. Same couldn't be said for Boise State. The offense has to be able to do things to keep, you can't, and that's what Notre Dame likes to do, is play mistake-free football offensively and just let the defense go to work. Let the defense cause all of the issues, create all these big plays, because Notre Dame's offense just play mistake-free football, and that's how we will win. That's the formula for the Fighting Irish. Franklin always loses the big game. The season is over tomorrow. I don't care if Penn State was playing Notre Dame, Texas, or Ohio State. Well, this is an open chat to everybody, right? It doesn't have to be all positive pro Penn State. I've said this before and I'll say it again. For James Franklin, I do not care what he did in 2017 or 2018 or recently in 22-23 against the likes of Ohio State and Michigan. And really that's what it's relegated to. That James Franklin can't win the big game. Well, the teams that he was losing to were national title contenders, and he was not a significant underdog, but a clear-cut underdog. People were picking Michigan, and look, that team went on to win a national title. Whatever the circumstances, I don't have time to debate Connor Stallions and Michigan's ethics right now. I don't have time for that. Ohio State, same thing. They were a national championship contender for the longest time. And Penn State lost those games because, yes, at those points in time, those teams were better. And they won the games accordingly. But what Penn State did against Ohio State in 2018, 2019, against Michigan in 22-23, has no impact on a game between two unfamiliar opponents in 2025 with different coaches, different players. This is a different version of Drew Aller. This is a different version of Penn State's offense. This is an Andy Kotelnicki and a Tom Allen-led offense. This is also a different version of James Franklin. James Franklin has been coaching at Penn State for over 10 years, and above anything, we have certainly seen progress. How many other of these Penn State teams would have made it to this national semifinal here? I don't care about SMU and Boise State. I'm talking about having the grit and the will to not get into upset territory. Maybe the 2017 team probably gets it. That probably is the closest. I think that's one of the best teams in James Franklin's tenure. Everybody's going to look at the 2016 team, but remember, they lost to USC. Those teams have no impact on what Penn State does in the new year here in 2025 against a completely different opponent in Notre Dame that is out of conference. The big game moniker for James Franklin, the big game stigma does not matter here. It's Penn State versus Notre Dame in 2025. It's Andy Kotelnicki against Al Golden. It's Mike Denbrock against Tom Allen. It is James Franklin against Marcus Freeman. It's Drew Aller against Riley Leonard. All those players, Trace McSorley, Saquon Barkley, they're gone. Zach's analysis is spot on. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for watching the show. Notre Dame is too injured. Well, Notre Dame is losing the quantity of impact players because Abdul Carter, certainly, him being limited, you want him to play 100% of snaps. And fortunately for Abdul Carter, it's not a lower body injury, because if he is not contacted every play, which is why I think he's going to go into this hybrid type of role at defensive end, linebacker, just a stand-up freelance defender. He doesn't have to be hit every single time. He just has to be disruptive. And you can do that without contacting and getting hit by a tackle, a guard, right? An extra tight end tries to chip you on the way out on a play to help you. A running back tries to chip you in pass rushing situations. But Notre Dame has certainly, Jeremiah Love, star running back, Cooper Flanagan, just kind of that do-it-all tight end that people don't give enough credit to. Riley Mills, best pass rusher, is out. Howard Cross, best overall defensive tackle for Notre Dame, is hurt. And then other guys are dealing with bumps and bruises, but they're going to play just based on, hey, they played against Georgia, they played against Indiana, they are expected to play. But that's 4 players that I just named that have a significant impact in Notre Dame's offense and defense, that aren't just, oh, they're rotational guys. No, these are legitimate players, and they're either hurt and out or limited, whereas it's just Abdul Carter for Penn State. So yes, Notre Dame is dealing with more injuries than Penn State. It's just bad luck. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I wish that Penn State and Notre Dame could play each other at full strength. Okay, this is interesting. I'm glad we can have this discussion. No, Carter needs to be playing defensive end, pressuring the quarterback nonstop. Don't want to even think about him being passive, sitting back, reading the offense, making plays. He will rush after the quarterback. It's just going to be different. It's not going to be against the left tackle every single play. It's going to be more of those special pass rushing packages. And they showed it early on against Boise State, where Penn State ran I am all for Penn State putting 7 defenders in the box, bringing Jalen Reed down close to the line of scrimmage, and daring Notre Dame and Riley Leonard to throw the football early and often. You are not going to beat us running the football. You are going to beat us throwing the football. Can Notre Dame do that? Well, Penn State can certainly defend it. A lot of these teams that Notre Dame faced outside of Texas A&M and Georgia are teams that do not defend the run well. So Notre Dame was able to have success. But Penn State, as we saw against Boise State, as we saw against SMU, is good at defending mobile quarterbacks and teams that are very run-centric. Notre Dame is just that, but they have a top 5 elite defense to complement them. So now what happens? Well, Penn State's just going to have to be a little more disciplined. They're going to have to fire on all cylinders. They're just going to have to play a better brand of football than they're already playing, because the caliber of opponent is better. But Notre Dame is very similar to Boise State and SMU from the fact that they have a blueprint to win games. And if you take them away from that blueprint, because Penn State can ad-lib. Penn State can be down by 2 touchdowns against USC and pass its way back to victory. Penn State can sit on the rock. They can run out the clock. Didn't mean to rhyme there, but you get my point, is that Penn State can win in a variety of ways. Notre Dame cannot do that. They need things to set up. They need things to set up in their favor in order to come away with a victory here. And it doesn't get any easier. This is the best team that Notre Dame has faced this season. We'll get back into the comments section to finish up the show. I also want to just share some other thoughts, some X's and O's, key battles, key matchups, because I think one of the biggest ones is Penn State's offensive line against Notre Dame's defensive line. I get done saying how 2 of the best playmakers are either limited or out of this game, and I still have my concerns about Penn State's front 5. Tell you more about it after the break. And welcome back to the show. Quick break, right? So for Penn State's offensive line, they showed struggles, and it's interesting because they did so well against Oregon. They did so well against SMU. For what it's worth, right? SMU actually is a really good front 7. That's an elite front 7 that had a top 3 run defense in all of the country. You want to talk about ACC and maybe the level of competition, but SMU still had a vaunted run defense, and Penn State's offensive line did well. They did really well against Oregon in the Big Ten Championship. That was my biggest concern, and now it becomes a concern again because they showed some weaknesses against Boise State. Now, I asked around, what's the issue here? Is it that Nick Dawkins and Drew Shelton and Sal Wormley and Vanga Ioane and Nolan Rucci's a part of this too, but actually Nolan Rucci's been playing very well. But who's at fault for the pressure on Drew Aller? It's a communication issue, I can tell you that much. Now, who needs to make these checks at the line of scrimmage? Because Notre Dame is going to run tons of blitzes, twists, and stunts, and they will come right up the middle with those linebackers. They will attack with those two linebackers right up the A-gap, and that is where Boise State got pressure. Boise State was getting pressure from a lot of different places, but primarily up the middle. And Drew Aller couldn't step up in the pocket. He couldn't shift around. So Boise State certainly figured something out that Notre Dame is going to look at on film and say, okay, well, we do that too, and we do it better. So that's something that Penn State's going to key in on. I am concerned about it, but I look at it this way. Penn State knows about this. It's not like, well, we had our struggles against Boise State, so now that's going to happen against Notre Dame to that extent. I don't think it's going to happen to the same extent. If things go wrong, then it could. But I don't think it's going to I don't think Drew Aller is going to be under as much duress. I think Andy Kotelnicki, Phil Troutwine, and everybody will just get the communication in order, because it's not that those front five can't block. They did it against Oregon. They did it against SMU. But they showed some weaknesses against Boise State that does have a solid pass rush. That was a team that had 50 sacks going into that game against Penn State for the Fiesta Bowl. Notre Dame is better. Yeah, so you definitely have to be at your best. So it is going to be up to primarily the interior of the offensive line. I've been impressed with Drew Shelton. I've been impressed with Nolan Rucci. But in pass protection, Notre Dame's pass defense and run defense are both top 10 objectively, and then overall top 5 because they force turnovers. They get after the quarterback, and fortunately for Penn State, they don't force a lot of turnovers, but 1 to 2 could be the difference. If Notre Dame does win you need to neutralize the turnover battle. Penn State doesn't even need to win the turnover battle. Penn State just needs to neutralize it. Have it be 0 to 0, 1 to 1, 2 to 2, whatever. Just trade that punch back and forth. Trade a fumble, trade an interception if you must. But if you are going to give up a turnover, if you have a giveaway, you need a takeaway to go back with it. And that's tough to do because Jeremiah Love does not fumble very often. Riley Leonard does not throw a lot of interceptions because he doesn't throw the ball a lot to begin with, but he does protect the football as a veteran quarterback. That's one matchup that I'm looking at. The other matchup that I'm looking at particularly is who's just going to be another option outside of Tyler Warren, Trey Wallace, and Amari Evans. Notre Dame is susceptible to not necessarily a random big play, but for more often than not, they gave up a few big pass plays to Georgia. Then if you watch that USC game, USC's offense was moving the football pretty consistently, but I do have to be honest, USC's wide receivers in that moment, a collection, and Kyron Hudson's joining Penn State, right? But all of those guys, the combination of Mekhi Levin and Zachariah Branch, they had 5 different options they could throw to, and Notre Dame didn't have an answer for that. Well, it's more about quantity in this case than quality when you go up against Notre Dame's defense. And that's my point, is that you have Tyler Warren. Okay, well, they're going to be focused on him, which is Aiden Schuler and Xavier Watts in the back end of the defense. So can Trey Wallace can he win a one-on-one matchup? Probably, but does he win them more often than not? He's going to need to win more than just 50% of those battles. And that's easier said than done. Same thing with Amari Evans. But after that, I think Penn State really needs just another player to shine in the passing game. Is that Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen? Is it the running back position? Is it Liam Clifford? Is it Luke Reynolds, who was one of the only 4 players in the Fiesta Bowl to actually catch a pass? It just has to be somebody. Khalil Dinkins, Caden Saunders, if he comes back and he's healthy, I wouldn't put too much stock into that. He's dealing with what has been now a long-term injury here, or longer than we anticipated. Is it Tyzer Denmark? Just anybody after Tyler Warren, because he's going to draw double teams galore. And then you have Amari Evans and Trey Wallace, who are going to have to struggle to earn their reps, to earn their production in this game against Notre Dame. So is it Luke Reynolds? Is it Singleton out of the backfield? Is it Katron Allen out of the backfield? Because we really haven't seen them involved in the passing game, but they can catch. You can line Singleton up in the slot. Singleton's speed. You mean to tell me you can't get him a quick slant, a swing route into the flat, and just let him go? That's what I'm looking for Penn State's offense, that they need a balanced attack, and it's more than just running up the middle and throwing some strategic passes to Tyler Warren. You have to do things that you've really gone away from here over the course of this season. Singleton and Allen can be effective pass catchers. That's who I would put the responsibility on in this game, is their Notre Dame's linebackers, because they are so used. They are used effectively in the blitz that if they're rushing up the middle, Singleton doesn't need to stay in the block necessarily if you swing him out to the flat and then he's got an open field in front of him. I think that can work out a lot, and that can be something at least to have Notre Dame hesitate and be cautious with the blitzes. So those are the matchups that I'm really looking forward to here. Notre Dame's defensive backs against Penn State's wide receivers. Flip it over. Penn State's defensive backs versus Notre Dame's wide receivers. Tyler Warren against Aiden Schuler and Xavier Watts, because that's one of the best safety duos in the country. Zach Wheatley and Jalen Reed certainly have a case for it as well. Abdul Carter going up against Riley Leonard. I think you swarm Riley Leonard. To sum it all up, swarm Riley Leonard, because now Jeremiah Love is not as big of a factor. It's Riley Leonard. He is the main guy in this rushing attack. Force them to pass the football. Put 8 guys in the box. Put 9 guys in the box. I don't care. Dare Notre Dame to throw the football and then adjust based on the success. Let's go back to the comment section. I appreciate all of you joining the show. Thank you so much. This final pregame show here. And I lost my spot in the comments, so bear with me for just a moment. We play best pressing the quarterback and the wide receivers, no zone. Do different things, right? You can't just run the same look every time. Now, granted, I agree that zone coverage has not been always successful, but you try to prevent the big play, and that's where, they're running zone in this case. Yeah, because their intents and purposes aren't to give up the big explosive plays, so they drop guys back. They have them play cushion coverage. But yes, Penn State, but that's how you build a lead, is by pressing, putting more defenders in the box. And in this case, instead of Ashton Genty, replace Riley Leonard, you go after him. I think Penn State is winning this game more on the offense. The Lions offense must be able to move the ball and put up enough points to put pressure on Notre Dame's offense to answer. Yes, could not agree more. Now Penn State is in a big game that means something. Notre Dame could have sticks glued into the ground tomorrow. Franklin will lose the game. Okay, that's your opinion. I think Penn State wins 24-20. If Penn State can run the ball consistently, that wins the game. Don't lose the turnover battle. Take away Riley Leonard. These are all tangible things. You don't need to develop this analytical game plan to figure out how do you stop Notre Dame. And all of the things that I'm saying are the inverse. How does Notre Dame win this game? Get Riley Leonard going. Can you see if you? I would say that try to get Mitchell Evans and Eli Raridan, the 2 tight ends, involved in the passing game a little more. Maybe set up some play action. Those guys can catch. Those guys can move, and they are big targets. So even though they won't create a lot of separation, they can box out. Hypothetically, they can box out a Jalen Reed and a Tony Rojas just because they are so much bigger than them in stature. Seems like Abdul Carter is making another business decision. He wants to play. Everything that I've gathered is that Abdul Carter wants to play and that he is okay. And it's not a lower body injury. So they just have to see, okay, when you do draw some contact, are you okay? So the first few drives will be the determining factor. They say he's a game time decision. I think he plays. Penn State anticipates that he plays, but it's a matter of how much he plays, right? A tight end and 2 of the best running backs in the country. That Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. Ohio State has the only other place in this argument of having the best running back duo in the country. That's how you close out a game. It's going to be on Singleton and Allen. And fortunately for Penn State, they are at their healthiest. Singleton and Allen have never been playing better football. And then in combination with the fact that the offensive line, granted they struggled against Boise State in pass protection, but look at the way they were able to run the football. I'm not saying that they're going to have that same kind of success. They're certainly going to have to earn it against Notre Dame, because Notre Dame has a really good run defense. But Singleton and Allen being at their healthiest, because we know that their some of the best running backs individually in the country, and then the offensive line peaking at the right time, granted with some of its struggles in pass protection, at least bodes well for Penn State. I feel like the media isn't giving us the respect we deserve. In my opinion, they still consider us a second to an elite program. If we win and lose in the championship, does it change recruiting? I think recruiting is what it is. I'll tell you what, if they win, that will change recruiting, especially because you are going to have to beat the team that they always fall second to, and that's Ohio State. Maybe it's Texas. Right? But anticipating that if Penn State wins and moves on, they would play Ohio State, and that's where you would prove it, because when they go for those elite of elite players, I think of Quincy Porter most recently, for example. He was interested in Penn State, but Ohio State gave him a phone call, and that's wide receiver U. And Ohio State has the bragging rights for all of the past almost a decade. It's been a long time. So that's where it's really about beating Ohio State in the national title, which would change the conversation entirely. But you got to start with Notre Dame. I really don't want to look ahead here, because this is a close game. This is a one-score game no matter how you split it. Whether it's Penn State or Notre Dame, if you think one team wins, it's going to be a one-score game. There's no way that a team wins by more than 7 points. Notre Dame was injured against Georgia and Indiana too. Georgia and Indiana are not Penn State. Those two teams don't play complementary. Indiana is not the same caliber as those teams. That was a home game for Notre Dame, and Georgia does not play complementary football, and they were down their quarterback. And there were outlier plays in that game too. Imagine if Georgia kneels the football in the final seconds. I don't know why they are trying to throw it with Gunnar Stockton, who is not a throwing quarterback. He's a running quarterback. You have 30 seconds, and you give the football right back to Notre Dame. That is bad coaching by Kirby Smart. Know your personnel in that moment. He's supposed to be this vaunted head coach, and he makes a biggest mistake on the biggest stage. Tyler Warren needs 20 touches. If Notre Dame is going to allow that, you certainly try to scheme him open too, whatever you can, but it's going to create opportunities for Evans and Wallace on the outside. You can't just force it to Warren if they key in on him too. And on one-on-one coverage, it's kind of like the way that Ohio State game planned for him. They didn't necessarily take him away, but they certainly limited him. This Notre Dame game can be won by Penn State if we... This Notre Dame game can be won by Penn State if we do win. That will say something for James Franklin. Yes, it can be won, and if Penn State wins. Okay, so now I understand your comment. That will be said. It says a lot about it. It says about how far Drew Aller has come. It says about the foundation of this team, and James Franklin is a huge part of that, because this goes back to the class of 2022 that was viewed as a potential national title contender. That includes Abdul Carter, Denai Dennis Sutton, Drew Aller. It stinks, but no Bo Pribula, right? And it's a shame that he's not a part of all of this. But Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, Amari Evans, all of these guys, and then you're able to retain a Tyler Warren, a Zach Wheatley, a Jalen Reed. You go get an AJ Harris through the transfer portal. All of these players together, but that foundation is that class of 2022, and Franklin deserves a lot of credit for that. The in-game coaching is really going to come down to the play calling of Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen. James Franklin will make coaching decisions, but it is on Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen have full control of the plays. It is on them against Notre Dame, primarily in the coaching aspect of it, if you will. The only thing that Penn State should be worried about is Notre Dame's special teams. Absolutely. I agree. I think field position is important. Notre Dame has shown that it can manufacture points with special teams. But that's all on tape. Against Georgia, now they're aware of it, that they got that kick return for a touchdown. So for Justin Lustig, he's going to make sure, and I think Penn State punting the football needs to be a little better too. I've not been impressed with Riley Thompson, but in a game of field position where every yard matters, every 3 points matters, you got to be able to flip the field if your offense doesn't get going, because momentum is not going to be a big thing here. Try to get one final comment in here, but I appreciate all of you for joining the show. How good are Penn State's cornerbacks? Notre Dame doesn't have a lot of great wide receivers, but Faison has been heating up. Mitchell Evans is very talented. Bo Collins is athletic when he catches the football. I think that I give the advantage to Penn State's defensive backs across the board. Jalen Reed, Zach Wheatley, AJ Harris all have NFL futures. I think the jury's still out on Zion Tracy and a Jalen Kimber, and then there's Davian Collins, and then they got Elliott Washington back. So Penn State not only has depth, but they have talent. But it's not to say that, hey, those just because they aren't NFL ready now, doesn't mean that they aren't college quality cornerbacks and defensive backs. I like AJ Harris against Jordan Faison. I think that's a big battle, but I give the edge to Harris. I like Jalen Kimber against Bo Collins. Now, that's going to be one that under the radar might decide a little bit of the game because that's kind of neutral on neutral. And then whoever has the advantage there, if Riley Leonard can find a reliable target, we'll see how Tony Rojas and, like I mentioned, Jalen Reed, how do they adapt to covering not only Mitchell Evans, but Eli Raritan? I think both tight ends are receiving threats in this game, and you have to and involve play action there. That's going to do it here for this pregame show. Penn State versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 1.5 point favorite. The total is settled around 45.5. I have the score: Penn State 24, Notre Dame 20. All that stuff in the past does not matter. This is a Penn State team now in early 2025 with two different coordinators, a more experienced quarterback in Drew Aller, and all of the superstar talent that you could ask for, enough to get them to this point. And I think they are best suited to defeat a team like Notre Dame. And then we'll see what happens when they meet either of Ohio State. I won't count out Texas. That's only a 6-point spread. It's not like Ohio State's a 20-point favorite in that game. So Ohio State's certainly the favorite, but we'll see what happens there. I'm confident in a Penn State victory. I really am. I think Penn State is built for teams like Notre Dame. As talented as they are, as much as respected, it's only a 4-point game. This is a 1-score game one way or another. But I think the Nittany Lions get it done. Thank you so much for checking out this live show. Thank you for your comments, your questions, your reactions to this game. We're going to do a live show at halftime. We're also going to do a live squad show to recap the game, win or lose, on this channel. We're going to have a squad show here on Locked On Nittany Lions. So if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.